and the souls who went before us. Stand tall, be proud, and lift your voices. Let them know who we are and our choices. And one day we won't have to sing this chorus. Waiting for a change.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are we doing? Welcome. I want to thank everyone for joining us for this important conversation. How are you all doing? We'd like to begin this event with a tribal land acknowledgement because although we are not gathered physically together, we believe it's important to acknowledge that the YWCA resides on the traditional homelands of the Spokane people and other Indigenous peoples who are connected to this region. We wish to recognize the Indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed and displaced from their ancestral and spiritual homes and the taking of their land through colonization. We recognize that land acknowledgement is only the first step towards honoring the contributions of Native Americans and Indigenous peoples today, and continue to strive towards policies and practices that bring about justice and reconciliation. We respect and honor the first people of this land, past and present, on which we advocate, work, and live. Thank you to all of our panelists today for taking the time to be part of this important conversation. All right. I think Gemma is going to turn on our panelists' videos, and I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves briefly. Esteban, I'm going to start with you. Would you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Esteban Adevia. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm wearing a black shirt that says beautiful in rainbow. I have dark brown skin and I have black hair. I am the president and CEO of Spokane Pride, the organization that puts on the Pride Parade and Festival. And I can't tell y'all how grateful I am for our conversation today. When COVID first hit, one of the very first phone calls I got was from a young person who had expressed that they were in a domestic violence a situation, relationship, and they needed help out, and they didn't know what to do at the top of the pandemic, right? Everything's shutting down. Where do I go? How do I, what sort of resources? There was a lot of confusion. And so throughout the last couple of years, trying to navigate where our current state has been very interesting. And I think, for our friends who might be experiencing violence in their relationships, this conversation is beyond crucial, especially here in Spokane. And then a part of my story that I don't talk about often is, as a gay male, I have experienced violence within relationships that I've had as well. So not only is this conversation something that I think our community needs, but it's also something that I've walked through too personally. And I can't thank y'all enough for helping us create the space to have this conversation today.
Thank you. I really appreciate your sharing. Britt, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Britt Wilson. I am one of the therapists on staff here at the YWCA. I loved your intro, Esteban. I'm going to steal some of it. So I am wearing a white shirt that has a rainbow flag on it. You can sort of see it. Jeanette's wearing the same shirt. It's our flag. It's our shirt. You can buy it online. I have brown and blue hair. I'm wearing glasses. I have kind of light olive skin. And my pronouns are she, her. I've worked with the YWCA for, oh gosh, I started here as a grad school intern in 2015, so 7 years ago. That's wild to think about. I've had a few different roles here, but my most recent one is being a mental health therapist. I also identify as queer, I identify as bisexual, and I have also been through my own share of abusive relationships and some other kind of traumas. So this is something that's really important to me, both as a person who works in this field and as a person who's kind of been in those shoes before. And I'm just really excited to be here.
Great. Okay. Gemma, I'm going to reach out to you really quickly to see, do we have Lou with us today? She's not on my screen, so I don't want to miss her if she's here.
We have not had her hop on, unfortunately, so I think we should proceed. And if she joins us, all the more wonderful.
Great, we'll just introduce her then. Just be sure and chat to me or something and let me know so that I can introduce her. So thank you for that. Wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to get started, and I would love to let you know kind of an overview of what we do, like our other Pathways Forward events. This discussion is going to include kind of three key parts. We're going to define the problem, outline some solutions, and then be answering some questions that those of you who are participating in this, you can put in the chat. There is, during the course of the conversation, as your questions come up, please enter them in the little Q&A box at the bottom of your screen so that we can answer as many of those as possible. Feel free to use the chat feature to throw out thoughts or observations that you have and communicate with your fellow attendees. So just be sure to direct your messages to everyone so that we can see those and respond to those. So I'm really excited to get started. So, okay, at the YWCA, we define intimate partner violence as a pattern of controlling behavior used to maintain power in a relationship by one partner over the other. So here's some statistics on domestic violence within the LGBTQ plus communities. Bisexual women experience the highest lifetime prevalence of intimate partner violence at 61%, in comparison to 43.8% of lesbian women and 35% of heterosexual women. In a study of male same-sex relationships, only 28% of men called the police for assistance after experiencing near lethal violence. In 2012, fewer than 5% of LGBTQ survivors of intimate partner violence sought orders of protection. I'm going to ask the panelists some questions that'll help us understand what domestic violence is and how it affects our LGBTQ plus community. So let's start with Britt. Britt, what are some of the unique challenges that LGBTQ plus survivors face?
I think, well, let's see, where do I start? There's a couple of them. Some of them are kind of broader systemic things, and some of them might be kind of more about that individual person. So I'll start with some of the broader ones. There's already, whenever you have a population that experiences stigma in general, those people, we're going to be less likely to talk about our experiences overall, right? We're going to be less likely to share what our lives are like with people. We're going to feel like we have to hide more from people. And that includes our relationships. The progress has been made. Like, there has absolutely been progress made, but there's still a lot of people who don't feel safe even saying that they're in a queer relationship or that that's a part of their life or their identity. So that's going to be a big part of it. And that's going to contribute to people even being able to say, I'm in an abusive relationship. If they can't say they're in a relationship in the first place, they're not going to be able to say I'm in an abusive one, right? So there's that. The people are going to worry about things like, if I go to this service provider, are they going to help me? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to condemn me? Are they going to, are they even going to be willing to help me? And that's across the board, but I think especially it's worth it to note for our trans brothers and sisters and siblings that, like, they're also going to have some extra barriers. Like, if you're a trans woman going to a shelter, are they even going to let you stay, right? Like, questions like that are going to be things we have to ask ourselves that are a little bit extra. And then on an individual level, you're going to have people who maybe aren't even out yet, who can't, like, admit to things personally, or maybe that's hard for them. Something that comes up a lot is that even if you are out about being in a queer relationship, because there's all of that stigma already, you're not necessarily going to want to say this relationship is bad because you don't want to make your community look bad. right? You don't want to perpetuate like the community not looking great. So those are some just off the top of my head that I can think of.
Thank you. Esteban, you want to chime in on that?
Sure. I think one thing that I hear often too is finding a partner who, you know, from my experience, for instance, like being gay specifically here in Spokane, it can be very difficult to find a partner. And so when you do find someone, I can totally imagine for some of our friends that they want to cherish it and they want to hold on to the relationship as long as they can. And so sometimes in those experiences or in those being with those people, we might uncover their behavior, and because we might not want to let go of the relationship, or we might not want to have to be single again, we stay in it. I hear that as an experience often, where folks don't want to have to, because they don't want to go find something else or let it go because it was already hard to find. Am I going to find it again? And then I think too, another part is like, and I think this is true for everyone, right? We want to believe the best in people. And so I think for a lot of folks, like when they are in relationships with folks, I think they want to believe that they're making the best decision, that they're choosing the right person. And for some folks, that's not the reality. And so then when they find themselves in the moment too, like, how do we help them see further? How do we help them see that, yeah, we can believe the best in folks, but sometimes, we've got to stop. We've got to pull ourselves out. So I think I agree with everything Britt's saying. I totally affirm all of that. And then I think too, there's also this, like, if I walk away from this, then I lose it. Am I going to get it again?
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. How does stigma contribute to higher rates of domestic violence and intimate partner violence among LGBTQ plus communities? Can you talk about that a little bit, how the stigma contributes? Britt, you want to start?
Sure. I think there's a lot of ways that contributes. One of them, which Esteban touched on, is that sometimes depending on where you're living, our communities are small. And we may not want to like put that out there, that like we may not want to besmirch our communities when they're already small and when it's already hard sometimes to be out. Stigma also affects us a lot in the ways that we are willing to ask for help and how safe we feel asking for help. I think that's a big part of it, is that if don't feel safe talking about it, then what am I going to do, right? Who am I going to tell? Who am I going to reach out to? That's, I think, a huge part of the stigma. I think the other piece is, and this is kind of across the board with relationships in general, but especially with young people who are getting into their first relationships and things like that. We don't have a lot of examples out there of what we're just now getting some representation in media, like that's like just now a thing that's happening. And they're not always the best representations. So what are kids looking at? What are they seeing as queer relationships look like, and whether or not they're healthy and whether or not they're good. I think in a lot of ways it's kind of harder for us at times to spot abuse because we don't really have anything to compare it to. So I think that's a big part of it too.
Thank you. I really appreciate your bringing that up, because I think that younger crowd, that younger population is really looking for, that model. And sometimes that's really hard to see. That's a great point. Esteban?
Just to build off of that too, like considering or to, when we think about the role of social media, we think about Instagram and how, we do want to be sharing positive stories. We do want to be showing the reality of what it's like and how we build relationships. And we totally want to look to relationships or we want to look to folks who have successful relationships. And unfortunately, what we also find out is that there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes that that doesn't play out in real time on social media, that we don't see. And so Yeah, Britt says it perfectly, said it perfectly. Like we look, so we want these examples, and we look to them, and then when we realize that we're in them, it can be, yeah, it can be detrimental at times, because I think we want to live to this standard or to this expectation, and then when we realize we're not in it, that, or that we have something that's not what we thought it was, um could also distance between ourselves and seeking help, or looking for more resources. um and then two, and I think I just saw a comment about it, right? Like mental health also plays a huge role in how relationships can form and how they play out in the spaces that we find ourselves in, and also the long-term exposure of it, and over time what it can do. And so, and then also too, like, our systems in our society doesn't reflect, and doesn't, or it cannot reflect at times, the worth of our community. And so having moments where you feel unworthy, or that you don't deserve help, or you don't, like, that's also very real too. And so there's this constant, like, you have messages from media, you have messages from society, you have the people that you're interacting with, your community. You may not feel even, well enough or safe enough, or worthy enough to know that you should look for help, or that help exists out there. And so I think, yeah, there's just this big tangled web. It feels like there's just all these different factors, or barriers, or whatever language you want to use, that I think, yeah, again, makes people feel like they have to be distant from seeking help, or from confiding in folks, or even just saying, hey, I think I might be experiencing XYZ.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. And you're speaking to some need for resources and reduction of barriers. So, as we kind of continue this conversation, I want to transition, to exploring some solutions, and actually, talking about some of those resources that you're mentioning. We encourage you to continue to submit your questions in the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. So thank you for those that are participating in that way. We're going to be answering some of those questions soon. Esteban, I know the theme of Spokane Pride 2022 was reimagine. So how do we reimagine access for this community?
Gosh, I've sat with this question multiple times, because even just beyond domestic violence, right? There's so many things that our community needs access for, especially here in Spokane. And so when I consider the theme of reimagine, I think where my mind instantly goes to is, and specifically talking about access, it's how do we be transparent with the systems that are in place, and how do we come alongside the systems and challenge them to be, to offer either inclusive or affirming spaces, and then also to have the boldness to say, hey, that's not working, or you're not doing that right, or we have a better way to be doing this. I think some folks think that we're some small community, we're just a couple of hundred people off to the side, when in reality, if you went to the Pride Parade this past weekend, it was almost 50,000 people. And for us to have that many folks accessing this one day in Spokane that's meant to celebrate our LGBTQ plus community, I'm going to guess that there's even more folks out there than what we can imagine, or than what we can see. So when I think about reimagining access, I think about how do we consider the systems, how do we consider the operations, even ourselves, and as LGBTQ plus serving organizations, what are ways that we could be rethinking our systems of communication, and how do we connect with folks? I think also it provides us the opportunity to recognize that we aren't perfect and the job's not done. And so we need to be putting all of our energy into making sure that if someone isn't going to offer it, that we are trying to find the places and the people who are, and to support them and to uplift them. And so, like, y'all's work in trying to figure out how can we come alongside the work that you're doing, the people that you're seeing, at the YWCA? How do we help that? And are there ways that we could be a better partner to you? The other thing too that I think is important for us to know is the GSAs, or what was formerly called the Gay Straight Alliances, and now they're Gender and Sexuality. I think also Alliances is what they're calling them now. They're growing. So East Valley High School in the Valley, before COVID, they were serving about 10 students. And the other day I was talking to their advisors, and they now serve over 100 students. And so we're now seeing our community grow, even in our school, like the number of young folks who identify, they're being more comfortable with sharing their realities. So we also need to be considering access now is going to have an impact on access when they, as they get older too. So it's not just an immediate solution, but it's a solution that's going to help us long-term as well. Does that make sense? Is that pretty clear?
That totally makes sense. And, thank you for talking about that growing population and the importance of understanding that more services and more resources are going to need to be available, and to make sure that we're strategically planning for that as we move forward in our organizations. Britt, did you want to jump in on any of that?
I mean, I feel like Esteban nailed it.
Yeah, I really do appreciate
the only
that.
thing that I would say is that I think in order to, I would just hop off of what he was saying about the fact, in order to address this, we have to get to the root of it. I think a lot of people, when gay marriage was legalized at the federal level, 2017, I want to say, a lot of people were kind of like, okay, everything's great for the gays now, like everything's fine, and like we fixed everything. The work is not over. It's not even remotely over. And like any right that we have, we can't take it for granted that we have that right, and so I think one of the biggest things that I think is important when it comes to making accessibility a better option is to sort of get to the heart of it, and to sort of have people understand that like our lives are complex just like anybody else's, and that our rights are never guaranteed, and that we don't have, we can't just kind of, okay, we're good now, you can't, like, that's not like, love that so many people come to Pride, love that people love that, love the people, like I love that, but there's a lot of people who kind of just stop there, and we can't do that, if we want things to be really accessible. It's something that we have to keep in mind, and we have to keep thinking about.
Both of you touched a little bit on systems, so I'm going to deviate from the script a little bit. So hopefully Gemma isn't going to and Laura jump through the screen at me at any point in time. But let's talk a little bit about systems. I mean, if you were to call out a system, or to want to, reimagine something different, what systems would you try to reach out to right now, or work with? Give me some comments on that.
Oh my goodness. Because the other part too is the tension is we don't, how to best describe this? So there's a tension of, we do want to reimagine, but we also need to recognize that there are people within the systems who are trying to shift them. So this isn't a critique of the work that's being done right now either. But like when we talk about the mental health care system, right? Like we know that is completely flawed and broken, especially for LGBTQ plus people, specifically trans folks. When we talk about houseless services, specifically here in Spokane, right? The number of houseless services that will serve a trans person is only like 2 or 3 out of the like 10 that exist. And the fact that folks don't even recognize that or the majority of folks don't even know that the second that they walk into some of these spaces, they're going to be kicked out right away is just super sad. I think obviously city government has the potential to change, to reimagine. Again, when we consider houseless folks, if there's a trans person on the street and we have a street sweep and they get put into jail, the likelihood that they're going to be put in a jail cell with the gender that they do not identify as is highly likely. And so the type of violence that they could experience when they're in jail, the type of discrimination that they could experience is high. And so, yeah, there's just a lot. There's a lot of pieces that connect that if we don't get the connection right, it has detrimental outcomes. And I'm, again, I know that there's a ton of folks out there who are working, trying to piece through and who are trying to shift things, but I think we still need to be even more critical of the systems, especially here locally. Britt, can you think of anything else that I may be blanking on? Or
I think you covered most of what I would have said. The one thing that I would say is that in my years of work here, I used to be more of a frontline advocate for a long time. I was doing more of that kind of work for quite a while. And I think there's something, I think we need to acknowledge that a lot of these systems are inherently traumatizing to people. That they are inherently re-traumatizing already traumatized people. So like when you talked about how, you know, if a houseless trans person is put in jail and then they're put in all those systems and all of these things, like all those levels of re-traumatization. And I think that for a long time, like systems tend to kind of get stuck in these patterns where they're like, well, it's working well enough, right? It's working well enough. We'll just keep it the way that it is because change would be too hard. There's not a lot of trauma-informed knowledge in those systems of the real impact that these systems are having on people. I think that's a huge part of it, is that they just, I try to look at the world as in, maybe people just don't understand, right? That's, I try to make that my first assumption when I'm looking at the world, because it's, you know, I try to be that way, but I really do think that a lot of these systems just don't understand how traumatizing they're being, and they don't, and then if they don't go out of their way to learn, like if they don't go out of their way to learn how traumatizing their systems are, or if they don't listen to the voices of people that are being traumatized, then of course nothing's going to change, right? You know, nothing's going to happen if they don't know, or if they won't acknowledge it.
Thank
I
you.
think there's something else we can name is, and specifically with resources like the YWCA, right? I think there's also this perception that they only serve women. And so for men, it can feel, and again, the history has been that we serve women, right? That the organization serves women. And so I don't want to deny that, but also at the same time, like, what are the resources that exist out for men? And how do we create the system for care for them as well? And how do we make sure that we're, because I mean, it's, we all know at this point that men are experiencing domestic violence as well. And so how do we, and intimate partner violence as well. So I think also too, like, how do we speak into that? How do we consider that? And what are ways that we could be reshifting and reshaping that too? That's also super crucial. And I think we experienced that too with mental health and in other areas where it feels, where the men feel like they don't have anywhere to go, or they have to live up to, you know, a certain level of masculinity, or masculinity only allows them to express in certain ways, or violence is the answer, whatever it could be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Are there ways you wish that LGBTQ plus allies would support you and your community that you don't currently see happening? What kind of support are you looking for that you wish that the allies could bring to the community?
It's not that folks don't already do this, but believe us when we tell you our stories. When we share what we're experiencing, or what our reality might be, I think it's important for our allies to know, to believe our stories. Just because you may not have experienced that way, or because it may not be true to you, does not mean that it's not true to me. And so I think that's one big thing that I always try to encourage allies to do is to make sure that when your friends are sharing their stories, that we believe them, because they're sharing their stories probably because they trust you or they perceive some level of connection with you. So when they're sharing something, even if we don't believe it or if we can't see it, or it may not make sense to us, it's making sense to the person who's sharing. And that's the same goes with racism, right? Like when we consider when folks experience racism, you may not have had that experience in the store with them, but they're telling you that that's what they had. Our job is to believe them, and then next step is how do we take action? And so how do we confront, how do we show up, how do we use our bodies as ways to um to either shield or intercept or interfere, or how do we use ourselves as ways to come alongside folks when they're experiencing trauma? Like I had to go to the hospital a couple years ago, and the doctors nobody would talk to me. And so it took a friend to stand up and be like, hey, I noticed that you're not listening to my friend. Um, can you come? And then anytime that the doctor would come in, she would come in and she'd sit so that way, and she would ask the questions. And so there's multiple levels, but I think it starts with believing our stories. And then when you believe us, then we have to go out and like actually do action and follow up with movement and whatever the situation may call for, even if it's just being there for solidarity, even if it's there to have the drink with them, even if it's there to cry with them, whatever the experience is with us, I should say, not with them, with us, like having those critical moments of reflection are important.
Great, thank you. Britt, do you want to jump in there?
I think the only thing, what I thought of after I think about it for a second, what I thought of was, and I appreciate that Esteban pulled in the anti-racism bit too, because to me, I think it's a similar thing, is that allies have to be willing to jump in even when it's uncomfortable for them. And that's the case for also us lighter complected people, when we're talking about racism. But it's also true for allies of the LGBTQ community that, I absolutely want you to come to Pride and have fun and have a great time and enjoy this community because it's beautiful and amazing. And I want you to do that. But I also think that there are some people who don't go beyond that and that they don't challenge people maybe when they see them perpetuating some of these myths or perpetuating some of these, homophobia and transphobia and queerphobia in general are not dead. They're very much still alive. And if we don't challenge it, then it's going to keep growing. So that's one of the things that I think is part of being an ally. That's an active thing, is that, you have to put yourself out there and kind of challenge things, even when it's not the fun party part. Come to the fun party. I want you there. Absolutely. We'll have a great time. But you got to kind of get your hands a little dirty sometimes too. And I think that's a big part of being an ally as well.
Yeah, that leaning into the discomfort.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's part of it. So how do we demystify seeking help? And I think that that's a big question, not only for this community, but also for a lot of our communities that we are working with here at the YWCA. How do we help LGBTQ plus survivors understand that they are not alone?
I do mental health stuff now, and there's a lot of stigma around getting mental health help. Like that's still a thing. So we work around this a lot. And I think one of the biggest parts of demystifying getting help is demystifying the reasons why people get help. I think we have to start there. Because if you're demystifying, like say if you're looking at it from a mental health angle, right? Some in the chat or one of the Q&As asked about, mental health at some point. You kind of have to demystify mental health first before you can demystify getting help for mental health, right? Like it's kind of, you have to start there. You kind of have to start with like talking about kind of like the statistics you were reading off at the beginning, right? We have to talk about that and put that out there and just make that a known fact. We have to put it out there and make it a known fact that this stuff affects people's mental health, that it affects their housing, that it affects their finances, that it affects their families. So part of it for me, I think, is getting the knowledge out there and sort of demystifying the issues themselves before you can even try to demystify getting help for them. So I think that's at least a starting point for that.
Esteban?
I think also along with that, I think it's also important for us to name it as well. Like as an organization, doing things like this and saying, we recognize that this is a reality in our community. We recognize that there are people in our community who have done harm. There are people who have been a part of these organizations within Spokane who have also committed great harm too. And so I think it's important for us to make sure that we are actively participating and learning, and we are in the conversation, that we're not relying on folks to be the sole carriers of these experiences. And so I think a part of demystifying it is also us like speaking the reality and then coming alongside and doing the work. And then also too, like within our organizations, for instance, like we have to transform the outcomes. We have to transform the vision, the mission statements. I think a huge part of it is we as, and I'm speaking as my organization and others, one of the things that I've reflected on is folks hadn't felt safe for a long time because of either behavior by community members or things that they saw at Pride or things that they've seen at other Prides. And so trying to also create the space both organizationally and in culture in real time, I think also helps folks see that if they were to come to us with a question or needing advice or needing help, like we would be a space where they'd be able to do that without consequence or judgment or obviously we can't ensure confidentiality, right? Like that's not our role. We can't do that. However, trying to help folks understand that we can get them to places where they can get help, I think is also super important. And then personally for me, I want folks to know that I'm committed to this, right? Like this isn't, I've made mistakes, sure. I've been in situations where I realized that I had either awkward interactions with folks or I just maybe didn't perceive things correctly or whatever. And I have to learn, right? I have to shift, I have to change, I have to make sure that my behavior is matching the commitments that I have as well. And so I think there's also this internal part of me too that's like, I want to make sure that I'm showing up correctly so that we can walk alongside folks, so that when they have a concern or if they need help, that I'm also in a space where I can serve and help, accurately and accordingly too. So I don't know, there's just some pieces to that for myself personally where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to say this, if I'm going to do this, then I want to make sure that I'm doing it right.
I'm going to repeat that back at you. Behavior, that my behavior is in line with my commitments. So I appreciate your saying that, and I just wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to repeat that. So thank you. We've got some questions coming in. So please continue putting in your questions, and I'm going to start here. I'm reading from my Google Doc, so I'm hoping that Gemma and Laura are putting these here for me, so I'm doing this correctly. As leaders of the Spokane LGBTQ plus community, what do you wish LGBTQ plus allies knew about you? What do you want us to know about you?
Oh, that's a very interesting question about me, about myself, about ourselves. What to share? I don't know. I'm just like you. No, that's a cop-out answer. I think I have experienced a lot. I've walked through a lot of trauma and violence and pain. That's a part of my story. The other reality to that is I have been houseless. So I know what it's like to experience extreme, for most folks, like getting kicked out because you say that you're gay and not being able to return home. Like that's not a common experience, but for those of us who are in the community, that is a common experience. And so I think for myself, when I show up into these spaces, when I show up to work, basically, I'm trying to make sure that I keep people alive, and that this work to me isn't a show. This isn't a song and dance, but I know what it's like. I know what it's like to know that you have nowhere to feel like you have nowhere to turn to, or you don't know where the resources are. I know what that's like, and I don't wish that upon anybody. And so any way that I can contribute and show up. But it's also, there's moments where it's hard for me to show up in spaces too, where I recognize that I hit capacity real fast. And so I need to check out, or I may not be at things, or whatever it is. Like, so I think a big part of things that I like folks to know is that, like, again, if my behavior is not matching, if it's not aligned, then I need to be reevaluating how I'm showing up into spaces, and I need to be considering the work that I'm doing. And then too, like, as much as I would like to say I get paid for all this, we don't. This is volunteer for us. And so I'm going to do the best that I can with the time that I got. And if I don't have all the time, I'm sorry, but please know that we're doing our best to ensure that these sort of connections continue to happen.
Thank you.
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I'm waiting for Britt to say something about Star Wars or Obi-Wan or.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Star Wars. That's what I want everyone to know about me. I don't know if I've shown this on camera. I have a Death Star on my arm. Like, I've got the whole thing. It's brain rot. I would say that I want people to know that, kind of like Esteban was saying, I feel like a lot of us are people who escaped a burning house and are coming back with buckets of water. That this work is personal for us, and that it's not necessarily, we don't necessarily need to be treated like we're fragile or like with kid gloves because of that necessarily. Like, we don't need people to be like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, we don't need that. We don't need to be treated like infants, but like, we do just want that to be acknowledged, that that's a part of our reality, and that when we're out in the community and when we hear things or see things that are maybe not the most friendly to us, that there's an extra layer to that for us. And that's just, we just want people to be aware of that. You don't need to necessarily like hold my hand over it, but like just knowing that, and just considering that about us, but also knowing that we're people who are full of joy and full of love and full of being obsessed with things, and like, that's our, we're people with like complex life experiences, and as much as I think it's important to talk about the trauma that our community has been through, there is a lot more to us than the ways we've been hurt, right? So that's sort of kind of acknowledging us as full people on the whole spectrum, I think, is what I would want people to know.
Yeah, thank you. Got a couple more questions. This comes from Jacob. Do trauma rates correlate with the abuse rates for LGBTQ plus community? And how much of this is hurt people?
That's a good question. I think I know that, Jacob. That name sounds familiar. Hi, Jacob. I would say probably, yeah. I think it's something that, when we were talking earlier about what do we see, if all we've ever experienced in life, even just taking out like the media and taking out all of that, if all we've experienced in life, or if the majority of what we've experienced in life has been unhealthy or traumatizing, then yeah, that's going to be the model that we go off of. We do what we know. So yeah, I would imagine that does have something to do with it. A lot of my work with people over the years has been unpacking, like what was going on in their childhoods, how have they been treated in the past, what have they taken from, what have they learned from life, and how does that impact their behavior? And it absolutely does. That's a big part of mental health care, at least when you're working with folks that have been through trauma. So yeah, probably.
Esteban, anything to add there?
Nope, I'm gonna rely on the expert.
Okay, let's see. How does the YWCA Spokane support men or folks who do not identify as women?
So one of the things that I think we have had to really work on over the years is letting people know that you don't have to be a woman to get services here. That's it for it, kind of like Esteban was saying, for a long time, the domestic violence movement in general was focused on women, and I'm sure that there were reasons for that, you know, like there's reasons for everything. But it is true that it's not just women that experience abuse. So one of the things is that that's kind of our responsibility as an agency to say, like, you're welcome here and we want you here. And not just that you're allowed to be here, but that we want you here, right? Because there's a difference between those two statements. It's kind of like telling someone like, oh, you can come to dinner with us if you want, versus I want you to come if you can, right? There's a difference between those statements. So a lot of that is on us on our end. But it is true that we will, especially on the DV services end, will serve. If you've been through DV, we'll help you. That's the bottom line. And I hope that people know that, and that, you know, it's interesting. In general, a lot of people still in this community don't even know that we exist as an agency. Like, it's amazing how often I'm out in the world and people are like, who do you work for? And then I have to like explain the whole shebang, and they're like, oh my God, I didn't even know you guys were there. So part of it is that. Part of it is that people just sometimes they just don't even know the resources there in the first place. But the other part is on us to make sure that we're actively welcoming and putting that out there.
Yeah, you know, and I really think that's important as the YWCA, you know, as one of the leaders of this organization and of this agency, is that we make sure that people understand that our services are for all survivors of intimate partner violence. And that really is, you know, the focus of our work here in Spokane. That is different with some other agencies throughout the United States, but it is for us here, and that is regardless of gender identity. So I just think that's really important that we repeat that. So there's any other questions? I'm looking to see here, and I'm looking at time that we're at our key takeaways. So thank you for those questions. We really appreciate it. Okay, so we don't have time anymore for any more questions, but we really appreciate your engagement. So as we start to bring this event to a close, I'd like to ask each panelist to give their key takeaway from this conversation, and what gives you hope in continuing to serve and advocate for the LGBTQ+ community. What brings you hope?
It brings me hope that people care. You know, it brings me hope that this is even a conversation that people want to have, and that, you know, what Esteban was saying before about the way that like the GSAs are growing and things like that. Like, it's not necessarily that there's more of us. We've always been here, but we feel better saying we are, right? And that's a big part of it. So that also gives me hope that more and more people feel safe to be themselves, because ultimately, I think if we become a voice that's too loud to ignore, that's going to be a big part of it too, right? Is that if we are too many to ignore, that's going to help too. If we can be as obnoxious as possible. And I think that, you know, just the fact that anybody even wants to talk about this gives me a lot of hope too.
Esteban.
Yes. Gosh, I think recognizing too that we have folks who are in it, and folks who are willing to ask some hard questions and also willing to dive into the conversation. I think that gives me hope. And I think I also think that we give ourselves a lot of hope too, that we are not one story, we are not one experience, but rather a bunch of experiences, and together as we make sense of the information that we receive, we have the opportunity, yeah, to be obnoxious together, and also we have the chance to celebrate each other, lift each other up, and really give folks the opportunity to see the fullness, the wholeness, like what Britt was saying earlier. That this is an opportunity for us to help folks in that, to see that fullness come to fruition. And then on top of that, I also just want to take a side note to thank the YWCA for supporting Pride in Spokane. Like we can't thank you enough for all that you've done and the ways that y'all have highlighted Pride this month, and the ways that you have come alongside and supported us. And that just also means a lot. And so I want to thank you for your partnership and your time, and also your money. Like we talk about, putting your money where your mouth is, and y'all did that. And so I want to make sure that we acknowledge that in this space too, that you have shown up in multiple ways. And so we're very, very grateful for that too. Oh, I think you're muted.
I just got that. You get that little thing that pops up when you start talking. It's like, oh, wait a second, I'm muted. There's always that. Well, thank you. And just know it's part of our work. It is really part of our work, and a very important part of our work. And we're going to continue to do this work. We're not new to this work. We are true to this work. So we're just going to keep doing it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Esteban. Thank you, Britt, for joining us today. I want to thank you for participating in this panel. Please know that this is recorded and will be shared to all the registrants via email soon, and we'll be sharing it over our social media channels as well. I hope you found all of this time valuable. We have some upcoming community events that I'd like to mention. There are Juneteenth events, June 17th through the 19th at Underhill Park, the MLK Center and Liberty Park in the East Central neighborhood. By the Inland Northwest Juneteenth Coalition. We want to lift them up. Pride in Perry is June 25th in the Perry neighborhood by Odyssey Youth Movement. So we're excited about that. We're just so grateful for such a supportive community, and we know that together we can move the needle on domestic violence in Spokane and better support the LGBTQ+ survivors. Thank you both for all that you do. And for those of you that are participating, thanks to you for being part of this Pathways Forward and participating with us. We're really glad you chose to join us. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and enjoy what hopefully is some sunshine out there in 4th March. So thank you all.